Hi, everyone. Welcome to our weekly podcast. It's Robin, Jason, and Eric with Life Restoration Radio. I'm obviously typing and making some noises. So, how are you guys doing today?
It was really quiet when we started. I'm having a great day. How about you?
Oh, I'm doing well.
Good.
Jace,
you check in? Are you going to join the show?
Fantastic and amazing.
Fantastic and amazing.
Better than most.
Yeah.
Can't ask for anything other than that, right?
That's it.
We were debating on topics tonight to cover, and I don't know that we ever got anywhere.
We didn't.
Okay.
So, looks like it's about to storm outside like crazy.
Why don't we talk about, what we discussed earlier. Last week I interrupted the flow of the meeting, the energy, changed the state with a disclaimer that we have decided is not authentic.
Right.
100%.
Yeah.
So, shoot, you start.
Yeah, so it's not that we don't know anything. It's that we are not stuck in a state of certainty on what we know. And that has allowed us to know everything, I think, for today. And then, so we do have a disclaimer that we don't claim to know everything, but we definitely know a lot about a lot, which is what has led us to this current evolving state and has led us to greater awareness, has given us education and training more than many get with several degrees or masters. So we can't say we don't know nothing.
Well, we're somewhere between nothing and everything.
There, yeah.
In our knowledge. That's what I like to say. Some days I'm closer to the knowing nothing, and some days I'm closer to the knowing everything.
Great.
And that's just a matter of my opinion, and sometimes I'm wrong about both those. So
yeah.
There's a disclaimer alert, like we went through.
Yeah, that if you disagree with what we're saying, we do want to know about it. Like, give us feedback, question, where we might have heard something. But I will tell you that Jason and I heard a really great quote. This, was it yesterday? It was faith. Wait, what was it?
I have no idea. I haven't gone back to listen to it.
Oh, man, it was so good. Maybe we'll post it.
We can look it up while we're on the show.
It was Brene Brown's definition of
faith.
Oh, I don't believe it was. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
faith without vulnerability and something equals extremism.
I bet that is good.
Like if you were
faith
so certain
vulnerability
that you
know
no what you. That's her point.
Like, yeah,
if you were so certain about your beliefs that you will not allow anyone else to, like you want to just throw that up on everyone else, and you're not willing to be open, then that's not faith. Don't call that faith. I thought it was really good to look at that.
So why do you think there's a transition that we've gone through on this adventure from thinking that we know something to finding our beliefs shattered.
Everything we thought we knew about everything.
Correct. Shattered. Mm-hmm. Undeniably shattered. And it places you in this vulnerable place.
Whether you like it or not.
Yeah, I mean, it's not it certainly for me anyway, wasn't a comfortable place. And so I believe that the desire to not necessarily, so if you're, for me anyway, I'll speak for me. I became very gun shy in regards to placing my name on anything after finding out a tremendous amount of information that I thought I knew was not so. And there's a there's a lack of ownership in that, where if I'm not the answer man, or if I don't know anything, then I can't be wrong.
Right.
So,
but you also position yourself in a place of like inability, like where you can't really be yourself either, because it's like you're second guessing yourself,
right,
constantly.
And so there's a very thin line between this place of vulnerability and willingness to receive and knowing something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you can't have one without the other to be who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can't not know something, because you know who you are, where you are, and where you came from. And those are undeniable things that can't be changed. But I have found myself, I didn't come to this realization until this morning. I did a 30-minute muse, just breathing meditation, and got ready, got in the car, and started heading this way. And I was just going through all the different things that were in my head. And I have noticed that I have been kind of in a weird spot the last couple weeks. And some of that I identified as this unwillingness to accept who I am. And put my flag in the ground,
mm-hmm.
And say, this is who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as I was processing that, getting into the car, I said, you know who you are, and who you are is definitely not passive. And is definitely not silent.
Right.
And so, what can you do? What's the exercise to get back to this place of placing your flag in the ground? Doesn't matter where you are or what you know or what you don't know. You are being you authentically 100% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I went back to one of my favorites, which is Tony Robbins' I Am the Voice. I hadn't done that in a minute. And so on the way from the house to here, I did the incantation.
Yeah.
And man, was I ready to do business when I got here.
So tell people a little bit more what that incantation is and what that is in general.
Well, it's just...
And you're not on camera, by the way, so we want you to join our video podcast.
I really can't see the camera, so it's the idea of taking a thought and adding energy to it.
Right.
Frequency. And Tony is, I would bear to say, the best at making some very difficult things extremely simple. And almost to default, because people actually want to try and figure out something before they do it. If it's too simple, they won't do it.
Right.
Yeah.
They think it's too simple. There's no way that could work. But what he's done over time is just taken the idea, the understanding of knowing that to change your state, to break through, to go beyond yourself, you must change your energy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can think things all the time. He says, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, and then you open your eyes again and you're like, bullshit, you're not happy.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's the adding a different frequency to a thought to create a different future. And so reminding yourself who you are. I am the voice.
Yeah.
And he goes through a quick, I don't know, it's not very long, 5 minutes of that.
Yeah.
And if you participate with him, it will certainly change your state. And so I was thinking about that, and then me, and then the whole disclaimer thing, and realizing where my I don't know what you want to call it, apprehension to say that I know something was coming from. There's this place of doubt and fear, and it was stemming from something in the past, and it was dictating my future. And I am greater than that. And we are greater than that. And so the reality is that, you know what? We know a lot.
Yeah.
But what we're not here for is to be right.
Right.
We are simply willing to communicate authentically with others
about life.
About life, and we are willing to a different perspective.
Would you say that's what's different, or one of the things? I know there's a lot that's different, but would you say from a fundamental standpoint that that's what one of the primary differences is between the space you're in now and how you were before? Was that, did you look back and see yourself in a position of, and whether it was intentional or not intentional, it doesn't matter, but of being like, I'm right previously, and that was part of what locked you into that mindset, was you thought you had things figured out, and you thought you were right.
Oh, absolutely.
And so, yeah.
I thought I knew the end of the story.
Yeah.
And that gave me some sort of false security to operate in daily life, even when daily life was not progressing or moving forward, or life was throwing curveballs at me. It still gave me this false sense of security of, well, I know the end of the story.
Yeah. And
what I was doing, and what I believe most people do in this state, is they are living they're looking for a future salvation and dealing with today in hopes of this salvation.
Right.
And I realized that that's, certainly where I was. But what I really find interesting is that how I can be going about daily life today and not trying to be any different than I am, but because I've been willing over the last 2 years to practice, that it is now becoming a skill, and it's happening without me even realizing it. And I'm like, oh, okay.
It's just what you do.
It's just like this. I don't have to try to do it anymore. And I see it, and I accept it, and I go, okay, that's cool. Moving on. And it's just a simple willingness to be aware of who you are, where you came from, and then take action.
I think that, that what you're describing, so first, I've been through the same thing. But just from a formula standpoint, when I hear you say it that way, without kind of giving a lot of context to what happened, just kind of listing out the kind of, if there was a structure to it, I've had conversations with a lot of people in different forums, whether it's in the office or in church or in a counseling room or just in conversation, that have become paralyzed in life because at one point in time I'm in this job and it's going fine, and I think I've got my little world all figured out, as it would be. This is how it's going to end. I'm going to work here. I'm going to retire. I'm a good employee. Blah, 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 blah. My kids will go to college. And then one day somebody walks in and says, hey, man, we don't need you anymore. For whatever reason, right? And all that you thought you had figured out, and all the answers you thought you had, and the things that you knew were going to take place, got rocked to the very core of who you are. And a lot of people get stuck there. They live the rest of their lives in a space called, I never want that to happen to me again. I never want to feel like that. So therefore, I'll either never put myself in that position to let that happen again, which means I'll never put myself out there to experience anything greater than where I currently am. And anytime something approaches me that appears to be that, I'm going to like panic, run, self-sabotage, whatever it is, right? And I find myself years later just buried under a mountain of crap that I've piled upon myself, living in that same state that I was the day that the manager walked in and told me he didn't want me anymore.
Have you heard that example from Joe Dispenza?
This one?
Yeah.
No, I'm actually describing somebody I know.
Oh.
And I'm talking that particular instance.
Who, me?
No.
I'm saying this for a friend.
Yeah, no, that was a friend. That specific. I'm
asking for a friend.
Yeah, my instance was exactly like that, but much more similar to yours because it was involving my religion and church and all the stuff that I thought I had figured out, and I knew it all and had all the answers, and this is the end game. This is where it's going. And then it was like, whoosh, and everything got rocked over. One, from what I had become aware of, and two, because of what I've become aware of, the rejection of the people that were involved. Yeah. All the cookies crumbled.
Yeah.
And even today, I'm still having to deal with certain instances and circumstances and conversations where I did damage out of that knowing to people, right? Turned them off to me, made them think I was crazy, whatever it is, right? Where I'm shy off from even having conversations about stuff that I'm passionate about or like or feel like in the moment my self has told me to talk about, because I don't want to get rejected again. I don't want them to be like, oh, here he goes again. Here's another deal he's on to. Here's the next crazy drug he's figured out, right? Here's the next high or whatever it is that he's on. And so I've been the same way, like with certain things. I have not said, here's where I'm at, but it what you're saying makes sense. I'm getting more in that space of I realize like I don't have to know everything, but I also at the same time can't stand in the shadows and be someone who I'm not, because
be scared to talk about what I do know.
Right.
I wanted the reason I said
it's
that
like, sorry, but it reminds me of like for me, it's like being castrated. That state is like being castrated. I'm completely unable to create or reproduce in that state. Sorry.
That's an interesting example. I'm glad you finished there. I'm serious.
Castration.
I'm actually serious. No,
Vortex.
the reason I brought up Dr. Joe Dispenza is in his, docu-series that he does. It's like a 4-week study that he did with the women at the Women's House on making your mind matter, how to forget everything you knew or whatever, breaking the habit of being yourself.
Yes, breaking the habit of yourself.
He has this really great example that he talks about where a person, kind of the same thing, where something happened at their workplace where they were secure and had all these things against them, and then next thing you know they were let go. Well, in situation A, the person becomes bitter, and then he talks about neurologically how it turns into just anger at first and bitterness, and then it becomes like a part of your character. Yeah. And 20 years later, that's the the worst thing. Yeah, that's who you are. And then he says on the opposite, so this is the B. That person goes home. They feel the same emotions of that despair, that grief, but that period of time is much shorter. Yeah. And then they start using their energy or their severance pay to go online and get schooled in a certain area, and then they take that and start their own job, start their own company, and then they push it into blah blah, and then they do all these successful things that keep building on each other. And then 20 years later, you ask them, and they say that was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah, it's
and
how you
it's
process
just a
it.
difference. So I think that what people go through, we all have things we've been through that were horrific in some way, on some level to us. We all have that. As a perfectionist, I grew up thinking that I could always, my life was supposed to be perfect, and if it wasn't, I was going to sweep whatever it was under the rug, pretend it didn't exist, and my life was perfect. Yeah. And if my life wasn't perfect, then my life was over. Yeah. So I'm telling you that the day that I realized that I didn't have to be perfect was the biggest aha moment for me, because I was like, oh, okay, I got this. And so it's that thing. It's like some people look back on these things that have happened to them in their lives, and they have become these things. But if we are willing to sit with it for a minute and understand how to feel it, and not just immediately try to fix it and build upon, then, we can become the greatest people that, we can. And also, obviously, the people that we were created to be. But I have something interesting I want to ask you guys your perspective on that just came up a thought. What if someone has let that start?
Mm-hmm.
5 years, 10 years? What if someone listening to this says, man, 20 years ago when I had that miscarriage, or I had that abortion, or I, gave my child up for adoption, or those are all baby examples, or I did this wrong, or I, stole this, or, whatever it is, whatever incidents happened to them. Yeah, got a DUI.
Divorce.
Yep. Divorce, a good one. Come on, throw some
Gained 100 pounds.
Yeah, gained 100
Well,
pounds.
that
Lost
job.
a job.
whatever it is.
Ruined a friendship.
And
Lost
now
all that money in the
today-
stock market.
Yeah.
Yep. And now today,
Failed
listening
as
to
a startup.
this, said, wow, wait, there's some awareness there. I did that. I have become this. Can you, regardless of the amount of time it's been since you really started changing, get back to that person you were before in order to get beyond what you've never gotten over and start heading in the right direction any amount of years later? Can you?
So Dr. Joe says, let's see, Monday night we were on Stress Part 2.
Mm-hmm.
And he was going over, living in our natural, in our survival state, fight, flight, or freeze, and how we are actually matter, trying to change matter at that point.
Right.
And what he went on to say, isn't it interesting that when you are really truly being and doing something that you love, you completely lose track
Yeah.
of your mind, so your thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
you lose track of your body,
Mm-hmm.
pain, tiredness, whatever, and then you lose track of time.
Mm-hmm.
And so he goes into this whole thing. He's talking about you have to forget about your problem to overcome it,
Yeah.
which I thought was a interesting takeaway. And then he goes on to say that the brain pauses to create. That's what that natural state of being is forgetting about your problem,
Mm-hmm.
so that you can move beyond yourself or move beyond that problem. And ultimately, that's, for me, some of this revelation and the importance of getting in this place and time where I'm no one, no how, no thing,
Mm-hmm.
no this, no that, and just being quiet with myself in that moment, aka meditation,
Mm-hmm.
is what is allowing me to then get beyond my current reality.
Right.
And oftentimes we're so programmed to seek the solution, figure out,
Yeah.
Fix.
before we start. And it's one of these things again where you're getting in this vulnerable place with your eyes closed,
Mm-hmm.
and you're just listening to your heartbeat and your breath
Without expectation.
without expectation.
Yeah.
And really not seeing how it's going to connect to you having this new future.
Yeah.
But it is, in itself, the single thing that is rewriting
Yeah.
what your conscious realm of the past is trying to create in the future.
Yeah.
And so you have to take the time while you're awake, while you're conscious, and dedicate this time to something new. Otherwise, if you continue to spend all your time in this conscious place of simply reacting to your current reality, life, you're always going to end up with where you came from, that same old story.
Same old stuff.
And so what I have to say is, can anybody do it? Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's the simple willingness to get in the position
Yeah.
of doing the work.
Yeah. Doing something new.
He says, favorite diet. Shut the hell up. stop it. Just shut up and get in position and do the work and see what happens.
Yeah.
And so, anyone can be changed. I've changed more in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
But more importantly, I'd say the last 6 months than I did the first 11 and a half years of recovery.
Yeah.
And that's freaky.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and you've said something like that
it's
too.
the same thing for me in the last couple months since I've really, gotten into this new area that, we've been talking about.
Focus.
And kind of back to your question, and to piggyback on Jason's saying is, the question was, can you go back and
once you finally become aware.
Once you become aware, or to some extent, here's the thing. I think a lot of people spend a lot of time trying to go back in time,
right,
to recount like what went wrong and figure this out
and recreate.
Like, you're never going to really get back to who this guy was in 1975 or whatever it was, like, because that was then.
Right.
And so there's a lot of time and energy wasted on trying to recreate something that can never be recreated because it was in another time and another place and another age. And you have had experiences since then that you've acquired and had. So the thing is to get, like what Jason said, it's not about going backwards, figuring it out to move forward, which is what I would have recommended a year ago, 2 years ago, or something like that. Is, hey, you got to go back. Register, all these different things that you've done and been through, and figure out, and then try to map out a different path. But the reality is you don't have to do that. The jump across to a new place or to who you are really is in doing what Jason just described, which is taking time to say, all right, I don't have the answers. I know this much. I'm aware now that this is not healthy, right? Yeah. So I'm going to stop and unplug myself from that on a regular basis to become more aware of all these things, and then start putting new disciplines in my life to make those changes today, right now, in this moment. And I think what happens when you travel back is people start seeing these huge changes that they need to make, right? Like, because I'm looking back over a year, 2 years, and 3 years and all this stuff, and it's a lot. And the reality of and we were talking about this last night in the meeting, I think it was before you left or maybe after, but it's the little bitty things. It's not these huge epic changes that you need to make. It's the little bitty changes and little bitty practices that you put in place that turn into major events and major life change and restoration over periods of time. Sometimes those things come like, boom, wow, like that was amazing. Yeah. And sometimes it's just like, hey, that was different, but it was different than it was yesterday. Right. It's not the same stuff. And so it's those little practices of unplugging, doing the meditation, getting in that space, and then being willing, now that you've opened yourself up, being willing to go do whatever it is that you're made aware of. Right. And being responsible for yourself. Yeah. And one of the things I love that Dr. Joe says in his meditations, and quite a bit, and when he first said it the first time, I was kind of like, I don't say I didn't get it. I thought it was kind of hokey, but it was like, love yourself enough to do this. And I was always kind of chuckled.
I've never heard him say that.
I've always chuckled when I hear him say it.
Yeah.
And he says it during the meditation.
Yeah, he says it during the meditation. And when I hear him say that now, and I catch myself saying that now, it's like, it's such a real, awesome statement for yourself. It's like, I should love myself enough to take that time out and to do this because it's important. I would, if it was someone else's life that I cared about, I would take the time to do it for them. Why would I not do that for myself? Right. If it was my kids, I would do it, But sometimes we justify not doing things for ourselves like it's selfish or self-serving, and it's not. It's selfish in a good way, but it's not self-serving in a way that's like, detrimental.
I want to piggyback off of that real quick too, but I don't know if your thought was going to be the same. A couple things come to mind. One is there's something really cool that Dr. Brené Brown says when she's in that podcast with Oprah, and it reminds me of what you just said. With the shame, with any of these things that come on us that make us feel bad, she says she talks to herself as though she would to her child. Mm. And so when she's wanting to say, oh, I always do this or that, that's shame. Guilt is saying, I shouldn't have done that, but when you are when you talk down to the behavior, that's guilt. That's okay.
Yeah.
When you are the behavior, that's shame. And so if, in order to get out of that, if you will talk to yourself just like you'd be talking to your kids, and you'd be like, you know what, Robin, you could have done better, but that's okay. You're learning, and it's better than yesterday to say what you said. It's part of that self-talk. So that was the one thing I wanted to say. And the other thing I wanted to say was that we also have to remember, so this is a PSA to everyone listening that wants to jump on this bandwagon and start really becoming aware of some things. Just remember that your problems did not happen overnight, so they're not going to go away overnight. This feeling, once you become aware of it, isn't going to just dissipate. It's going to probably take, a good amount of time. Think about how long, that road that you traveled was to get to this place that you are now when you do look back.
Yeah.
And don't expect immediate. I mean, we're miraculous people, but I'm saying, like.
Well, I think one of the things some of the things that I've become aware of as I've opened myself up to just not know everything and just do some of these things is that some of the things that I thought were major problems aren't even problems. Right? Like, it wasn't like all of a sudden this thing went away. It was just I was able to see it totally different and experience it in a different way because it is what it is in that moment. Whether it's a person, a job, a relationship, or whatever it may be, like, it just is what it is. Jason gave me some great advice when my wife and I were fighting not too long ago, and I was not in a good space with it. And one comment was, just love her for where she is in that moment and quit trying to make her be somewhere else,
Right.
And for whatever reason, it registered with me, but it was like, all right. And so this huge problem that I was like, the only way that I could ever, this needs to move way over here and get totally fixed, and then before I could feel any different about it, once I changed how I was looking at it,
right,
it was no longer a problem. It was just is what it is.
Yeah.
And I was able to actually love in that moment versus judge in that moment. So there's a lot of that takes place too. So some of the mountains we think we have in front of us,
right,
maybe they're supposed to be mountains that we climb and enjoy, or maybe they're not even mountains at all.
Right.
Maybe they're molehills.
That's a good point.
So the first thing that I want to say is
Anchor, what's up?
Anchor, what's up? Got my anchor on. Now, the first thing I want to say is
we're double live right now.
Okay, authentic communication, right? What you said, the example in which you used about talking to your kids is an unrealistic expectation.
Okay.
Because 99% of the people out there, the parents, maybe not 99, let's say 95%, don't communicate to their children that way. Okay. So how are they even going to communicate that? How is it going to, using that as an example, and then the realization is the truth is, if you were to look at it, and we look at society, and that's the undeniable proof, is that we're not communicating to our children this way.
Right.
So we're definitely not communicating to ourselves
We'd
this
like
way.
to.
Yeah.
So it begins and ends with us in regards to communication. If we are doing it with ourselves, then we will do it with others. But we can't.
Right.
There's a high probability that we are not doing it out here in these other relationships. Otherwise, we'd be able to identify it in ourselves.
Yeah.
And then do what we need to do to change. And so a lot of times we want to use these external examples, and they are often tied to unrealistic expectations of the truth, or just the average, the not being able to see things for what they are. Because you can't go from looking at something as an example, then trying to apply it to your life when it's not something that's being done in an authentic way.
Yeah.
And
I was under the assumption of authenticity.
Yeah, and so there is no assumption there. And how many authentic parents do you know?
Just me.
Yeah. Actually.
Not.
No, I think, or I know that it's much different than we would like to believe. It's a much different number.
It's what we want to believe.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's the whole getting back to the whole it begins and ends with you, and really identifying who you are, where you came from, and practicing this communication, which goes back to loving yourself enough to carve out this time to get quiet with yourself and listen to your breathing and your heart and those types of things, instead of trying to go out there and do all this other stuff, like going to the gym
or shop.
Yeah, or whatever, putting everything in
nails
order.
Done. I don't do any of those two things. I'm just thinking of stuff.
I think that's a good segue into something with parenting, or how do people, how should people communicate with their children? You bring up a good point that
they probably shouldn't communicate to their children until they begin to communicate with themselves.
Yeah.
I would not have spoken to any of my kids then.
Then how do you communicate with yourself? How do you start that? Practicality, people. Let's give some people some steps.
Yeah.
By loving yourself enough to carve out time for yourself to listen to the podcast and begin to apply things that you heard, or listen to Tony, or listen to
any of the resources that we
with Dr. Joe, or this person or that person, but just
message us.
It's not the consumption of information, because the consumption of information is not going to change you.
The dilution of information.
It's the willingness to consume a small little bit and then go out and practice it and hit repeat over and 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 over again. And that's where people get jacked up, is they want that instant.
Well, it's the addiction to all this other stuff, right?
And the information
instead of doing that, I'd rather go to the gym, right? Because I can go to the gym and do a pump and look in the mirror, and there's people around me, or I can go shopping. People it's like and then next thing I know,
get a new outfit.
I've got to shop all the time. My credit cards are maxed out, and all this stuff. Like, it turns into something else. Or
and it's all just
I've got to eat. It's an escape.
Just numbing.
It's all an escape
We're numbers.
from an external thing that doesn't really do anything.
Right.
It doesn't solve even though it could be some of the stuff we're naming is good stuff. It's not that in and of itself is a bad thing to do. Exercise is not a bad thing to do. Going on saying, hey, you know what? I need to eat healthier. A lot of people do that. Like, I'm going to go vegan. I'm going to do this. They go these other things. They go down this path. Not diets and all that stuff are not bad in and of themselves, right?
Right.
But the issue is you're reaching out to try to solve. Like, you're way out here where what you're struggling with is way in here. And you're trying to solve, it's like medicine, right? I'm trying to solve a symptom. Right. And I'm thinking in solving a symptom, which is I need to lose 5 pounds. The reason I need to lose 5 pounds is because I'm depressed, right? Why am I depressed? Well, it's not because I ate Oreos. That's not what's causing that. I'll just branch out and do something else. The issue is I don't like myself.
Right.
That's it. That's why I run around and do all this crazy crap. That's why we get in bad relationships and put ourselves in bad situations and overspend and do all this. It's because, and that's why the last thing that I'm willing to do, or most people are willing to do, is say, I'm going to spend 20 minutes alone with myself.
Right.
Heaven forbid that I have to spend, because that's the person, the honesty there is, that's the person I dislike the most on this earth.
Yeah.
And the more resistant you feel yourself to that, the more heavily you hate yourself.
Yeah.
And so, let's go. Eric Gregg during
shout out to the Gregg family.
That was a commercial break from
So let's go to look at this. Let's look a little bit deeper.
Yep.
Let's break this apart. What is it that we're trying to fix? We're trying to fix these labels that society has given us to label ourselves as well as others. And those labels are like going to church on Sunday morning, wearing your Sunday best. It's about as kiddie pool deep as communication gets. We're talking like, 12 inches maybe or whatever, 18 inches, getting your ankles wet type of deal. And we immediately find this label, and then we take this action, this external action to solve this problem so that we can fix this label. But the reality is that it's not the label. That is the problem. It's we got to go to the deep end for this.
Mm-hmm.
We got to get immersed in who we are and what this thought, feeling, or emotion is at this current time, so that we can then identify and take action based on what is, not what we want it to be. And so losing 10 pounds, going to the gym, all these other things that we talked about are just the immediate surface. It's the fix to your addicted emotions and thoughts and feelings that you're not communicating authentically with yourself about, that continues to create this vicious cycle. So we talk about this all the time. Going and doing something that is good, like working out's good, eating organic is good, you know, all these different things, are going to church is good, you know, all these different things can be good, but they may not be good for you.
Right.
If you're not willing to get out of the way to go beyond who you are in the moment. And that's the secret to going from the same old story to breaking free and to being something completely different.
What comes to mind is that when I'm in that state, right, of not being grounded in who I am, or when I've been in that state before, all these things that I'm trying to do end up either not working, going bad, being miserable, and it's not effective, whatever it may be. And then you look at it and go, well, I don't understand, because I'm trying to do a good thing. I'm going to church on Sunday. I'm eating organic. I'm going to the gym. I've quit doing this. I've started doing this. And the reality is that as long as I'm polluted, I will pollute anything that I touch. And so if all this dysfunction is around me, it's not because those things are dysfunctional. It's because I've made them, I'm dysfunctional, and therefore am using them or making them dysfunctional. Right. So the solution isn't to grab onto more stuff that I'm only going to make more dysfunctional or pollute.
Right.
It is to cleanse myself by getting to know who I really am and moving away from, like I said, when we become aware of something, we need to take something and move it. Becoming aware of that, moving it out to, quote, purify myself into my purest state of who I am, or my most authentic state of who I am, so that when I go to do exercise, or I go to eat, or I go to shop, or I get in a relationship, it's actually me in a healthy state doing those things, and I'm experiencing those things in the manner in which I should be experiencing those in the moment, and accepting them for whatever they are, without having to put labels on myself and expectations on myself that I need to be this over here and that over there and whatever over here, and have this much money in the bank account, and have this size house, and this girlfriend, wife, you know, whatever it is. Not that I don't have a girlfriend, but...
Yeah. Well, what you said, the secret is, I thought mic drop right there. But I mean, I think that this is a really good place to just kind of end this segment of all of these, you know, when people are listening, they should be able to find themselves in something that we've brought up tonight.
Yeah.
And, you know, just understanding that their situation is not unique, that everyone has these things, and I think just being open to start it. But between what you said and what you said, look, I think drop the mic and boom. I mean, if we need to keep going, we can go round 2, but
I'm ready for some quiche.
We have a nice meal that has just been cooked for us that is tempting. So I'll get out. And if you guys could hear the rain on the tin roof, that was intended to be
roasted.
The background rainforest.
Yeah.
Yeah, so don't give up.
Don't give up.
You know, keep pushing and know that beyond your current reality lies this place called the infinite possibilities. And you cannot control it. Well, another thing, this is Dr. Joe night, I guess, so
yeah.
I just got the goose pimples again on this one, but he talks about it in his meditation, is that you cannot enter the quantum field as a somebody.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You must enter it as a nobody.
A nobody.
No thing, no body.
And so that's why we identify who we are, where we came from. Then we get into this place of willingness to not identify ourselves with that anymore, and not necessarily know where we're going, but just a willingness, a vulnerability to get into this place, this uncomfortable place of quietness and removing the distraction of life and learning how to just be. And that is the exercise that takes us into the quantum wave. And once you're on the wave, you have no idea what you're going to hit. But you just keep going because it's the juice.
Yep.
So,
Just be.
just be.
The juice.
Awesome.